Hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco from Macabre Daily, and I am super excited to be joined once again by good friend and filmmaker Rene Rivas, who is here to talk a little bit more about his newest film coming out on Monday for the Indiegogo backers, Rejected. But Rene is he's been doing this for a while. If you look at Rene's IMDb, you'll see a series of various shorts, some of which have been picked up by the likes of Bloody Bites, which is Bloody Disgusting's showcase for short horror films. Even some recent parodies of the oft maligned or loved Skinamarink. So Rene, it's really good to be talking with you again, especially with the new feature on the horizon.
Well, greetings and salutations to you as well, Matt. It's been probably about a year since we've talked last.
Something like that.
Yeah, and this wacky new short horror parody that we've been working on for quite some time. I mean, shoot, the screenplay was initially written in late 2021, and we launched the Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign for about 2 years ago, and just under 2 years ago, and then we've been in intermittent production phases throughout the last year and a half to get it completed, and then 3 months of pretty intensive post-production to get to the finish line. Um, Granted, this is only a 15-minute short horror parody, but I feel like it's got a lot of scope, and I think when people see it, they're going to really appreciate the amount of work and production that we put into this film.
I would heavily agree. And in fact, I would say that folks, and again, I'm acknowledging my bias here, I've known Renee for a while, but I also, am more than willing to look at things with my objective eyes. And I gotta say that I think Rejected is going to be really big for fans of anthology horror, but also those that like a little bit of comedy in there. I can only equate this to some of the more modern VHS segments in a way because they do have that tongue in cheek. But this is a little different, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit more about your inspiration for this because it's a really unique concept that I don't think has ever been done or even heard of before. So I'd love to tell everyone a little bit more about how you got to this kind of wacky idea of the Sonu Maverick.
Well, let's definitely acknowledge that parody has been around for decades and decades and decades, and we're not reinventing the wheel by any means, but I like to challenge myself and step into different sandboxes on every production that I take on. And we did kind of dabble in with parody with the Skinnamarink Doo kind of one-off thing that we did, but generally the films that we've produced in the past have kind of all been relatively serious in tone, taking themselves pretty seriously and just kind of writing that tonality. But I really kind of wanted to just let my hair down on this next one and just have a good time and have fun with it, kind of be a little bit self-aware and just have fun essentially. It's a product of well, let me backtrack a little bit. So when I was living in Flagstaff, Arizona, there's a I'll tell you about kind of like the origins and impetus behind the whole idea.
Yeah.
There's a camera store that I used to frequent all the time to pick up used vintage camera lenses, and on their social media page, they made a Facebook post saying that they were giving away two free vintage Mavica cameras, the Sony Mavica cameras, and I was like, awesome! I have a nice little collection of cameras in the living room. I'd love to add one of those to the collection. So I hopped in my truck and I drove directly to the store. And the minute I got there, the owner was like, "Ooh, you just missed it. He just picked it up right now. You missed both of them." And for some strange reason, that the idea hit me right there. And I remember specifically, I'm not going to talk about the exactly what the story entails, but the middle segment in the woods, the idea hit me right there. And I was talking to the manager. I was like, "Oh, that's a bummer that I got these." And I was like, how cool would it be if I took one of these cameras and made a spoof, like fake commercial about the Sony Mavica and placed some people in the woods and XYZ happens? And he was like, "Oh, that would be too fun, man. You should definitely do that." So the very next day I went to the coffee shop and sat down and wrote the treatment out of what would become the basically the skeletal backbone of what Rejected became. So this whole short parody started off with one segment, the middle segment, and the more I thought about it, I was like, this is a pretty solid idea. I think it would behoove us to expand it a little bit more. So wrote a beginning segment, an ending segment, and then eventually a little bit further down the line decided to intertwine everything with the wraparound. So it's essentially kind of like a mini anthology. It's a 15-minute mini anthology that's insanely zany, brutal, graphic,
Yes.
funny, horrible, horrifying, and it's got a death count of 7 wrapped into a 15-minute narrative.
And that's more than a kill every 2 minutes. I mean, at this point, I mean, and I think what is most interesting about this is that you're right. It is 15 minutes, but it does fly by. And I found myself watching it a couple of times. I'm like, I got to see that again. Like you almost, in fact, it's very rare in this day and age when we're seeing movies that are approaching 2 hours almost on average, that you see something you're like, I actually wish this was longer. And I think, maybe that's kind of one of the points here is that, this is an absolutely great example of what could be more expanded upon, but works exactly just as it is. So I'm wondering how much of this ended up on how much is there on the cutting room floor as far as footage that you shot that you didn't use or tried to maintain that efficiency of filmmaking?
Very little. Honestly,
Huh.
like, yeah, very little hit the cutting room floor. I would say 5 to 10 interstitial shots that were in the short film. Like, during post production, I would really just kind of go through the assembly and edit with a fine comb and just be like, what is kind of slowing down the pacing of this? And I'm glad that you brought that up because everybody that's seen it so far is just like, it flew by
Nice.
there's like hardly any fat. And I really try to kind of instill that with the writing and going into the production of like, let's definitely overshoot, but going into post production, I really tried to maintain like as little fat as possible, and not a lot of shots made it to the cutting room floor. Like for example, like the first segment when they're in the first location, I would say like maybe 10 seconds of that got cut
Wow.
from the initial assembly. Nothing got cut from segment 2. Segment 3, maybe 1 or 2. Yeah, barely anything got cut from segment 3. And the wraparound, we used everything that we shot. So I'm really glad that you're saying that it flew by because that's something that I really try to pay a lot of attention to was making sure the pacing was just sound, and that upon pressing play you're just totally engrossed and just sucked into this wacky narrative up until you see the title card at the very end.
I mean, your commitment to the aesthetic is super admirable, and I would love for you to talk a little bit more about all the work that went into making sure that one, this you could do this parody, without getting in trouble, but also, what was that like going through the editing process and making sure and how long did it take you essentially to put all this together? Because even though it's 15 minutes, this feels like it probably took you years based on how slick the production is.
Well, at the very beginning of the production, I definitely had the idea of making it 4:3 aspect ratio. That would play into the visual language of late '90s
Right.
cheesy commercials. So that was a given. I wanted it to look like VHS quality. I wanted it to have analog glitches, kind of like VHS series, and a lot of time and effort went into the post production to kind of foster that visual language. I guess is a good way to put it, and it's got a plethora and myriad of digital glitches, real analog glitches. Like, I got to give a shout out to David Bruckner. He inspired me to take apart a VHS tape. Like, essentially, what I did is I took the finished film, I dubbed it onto a VHS tape, I took apart a VHS, and then I hooked up an Atomos ProRes recorder to the VHS player, and as the guts of this VHS are all taken apart, I was doing manual
Ah,
um, manual digital or manual analog glitches on the VHS tape and recording that back onto a digital recorder and then implementing those edits into this short film. So there's a lot of real analog glitches that went into giving Rejected its visual aesthetic, on top of some digital ones mixed into it. But I really, I mean, you've seen a lot of the films that I've done before. I'm really a big advocate for packaging. Like if you're gonna lean into an aesthetic, fucking lean into that aesthetic,
Yeah.
and just commit and go hard. And that's essentially the same sentiments carried over into Rejected. So it's like, okay, so you're telling people that you're going to do this lo-fi horror thing, really commit to it and really make it look as authentic as possible, from the fonts that are used, from the aesthetic of the clothing, set design, practicals, everything and what have you. I really try to make it as authentic as possible. So yeah,
Did
a
you
lot of
did you do the music on this one as well? Because the music is absolutely spot on for that kind of PSA 90s TV ad.
So I scored the film, but the music that is in this film is by an artist named John Barnum. John Barnum, and I purchased the what's it called, the commercial rights to utilize this in the production. He's got a YouTube page and he makes a bunch of classic 90s sitcom sounding music. And before, actually, right around the time when I was writing the script, I did some diligence looking up some music, because I've tend to scored and done the music for the past 3 or 4 short films, but for this one, I kind of wanted to rely on somebody else's skill set for that. So I found this music almost 2 years ago, and I was like, oh my God, I could already envision the narrative over these kooky ass songs. So I bought the rights to the songs and put them in the film. And yeah, so the music in Rejected is John Barnum's work. The scoring is my work, and I would say about half of the sound design work that went into it I did, and then we outsourced a majority of the remaining sound design to our audio post production team in Burbank.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so it was like a tag team effort on the sound design behalf, and they did the mix and master. They provided like a 5.1 surround and 2.0 stereo, so we have a couple different versions. But yeah, circle back around to the music. It was John Barnum, and it works perfectly for it. Um, I had the songs picked out almost 2 years ago, and just they work perfectly.
I'm sure you have those thoughts, where you're kind of, you hear a song and you can envision the scene that it's in. You're like, okay, I think I'm going to drop this in there. So it's great that you kind of held on to that and kind of kept maintain that idea. And something I've also noticed as you've kind of continued to grow as a filmmaker is that you're constantly finding new ways to up your production levels, especially when it comes to the use of practical effects. Even beginning in Judy, you could start to see that you were starting to really take a greater appreciation for how you can use the best of practical and then add digital kind of as a just a sweetener. So I'm curious to know, how did you go about it with practical effects this time around? Because there's a ton of them in there, and they all work extremely well. So who are you working with on that side? What have you learned over the course of your filmmaking as well that's led you to kind of hone your craft there?
Well, I think this statement and sentiments, every independent filmmaker can kind of, what's a good way to put it? As independent filmmakers, I've said this before, we have to utilize our resources to the best of our ability. And granted, we did do a crowdfunding campaign to raise so it was $5,700 that we raised, but after fees and processing, it was about $4,600, and that went like that. And there was certainly no money left over for props. So like Judy, props and set design. So like Judy, I pretty much took the reins into my own hands and built everything myself. And with Rejected, it was the same sentiments. And there's one specific prop. I made a Facebook post like a year ago, and it was very cryptic. I didn't say what it was, but it was along the lines of like, man, just made probably the coolest prop I've ever made in my entire life. And I think you know what I'm talking about. It's from segment one.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
know exactly what you're talking about.
that was like a week a little over a week worth of work to put that prop together for like a 4 second shot.
Right.
And yeah, it's the same. It's the same sentiments for Rejected. Every prop was I put together myself, and yeah, that's another reason why the production got kind of pushed along. And if I had a little bit more plushed out of a budget, I would have brought on a rock star set designer and production designer and prop builder. But as independent filmmakers, we utilize what we can, and yeah, I ended up scouring. I don't want to say exactly what it is, but I ended up scouring old electronic junkyards in Tucson, and I went to 3 or 4 different stores just to get these specific components to put them together to build that miniature world. And it was like a week to put that whole thing together. Everything that you see on that prop was meticulously glued in. Like, it was pretty bare upon when it was first like kind of put together. It was pretty bare on the inside, and we meticulously glued everything that's in there, all the lights, everything.
I mean, it shows. Like, again, I think folks that watch this will be impressed by just how good everything ends up looking. And I know that, again, you've become really keen on the aesthetics and the visual side of things, but also you spend a lot of time with the effects. And, I'm curious to know, as someone who, you've been doing this for, God, over 15 years now, I feel like, almost 15 years, it feels like. And I'm curious to know what you think has been your biggest area of growth, over that time, and what advice you'd give to other filmmakers who, again, similar to you, are continually doing and creating work. Um, what keeps you excited? What keeps you inspired?
I mean, once again, as an independent filmmaker, there's certain times where you have to wear a lot of different hats on these independent productions, and I don't want to necessarily be a jack of all trades and master of none. But pertaining to what you asked, I feel like over the 10 plus 13 14 years that I've been in this, I've really been focusing on working better with actors and crafting my directing skills, because ultimately that's my end game, is to direct feature narratives. And I definitely feel tons more comfortable working with actors, understanding what it is that I'm looking for and articulating that to the actors so that they can give me their best performance. Like, for example, kind of like on a random offshoot, a feature film that I made back in 2016, I'm gearing up to just release that myself. We landed an agent and executive producer on that never landed distribution. It's been almost 9 years. I'm kind of working on some tweaks on that, and then I'm going to distribute it. And where I'm going with this is, when I watch these scenes, I remember back then I gave my actors such little direction. I think it may have been just because I was the director of photography as well, so I was focusing on multiple facets. But it's really been interesting watching my film and understanding how important the actor-director relationship is, and just giving them the information they need to make the proper choices on set to foster the narrative and tell the best story, convey the acting to tell the best story possible. So that's ultimately what I've really been working on, is trying to be as good of a director as I can on set. And I still have tons to learn. I'm a student of life. I still have tons to learn as a director. And with Rejected, I really made sure to fine tune exactly what I was looking for per the performances of the players that are on screen. I have been a cinematographer for many years. It's not necessarily what I want to pursue. I love camera work. I love gaffing. I love grip and electric. I love post-production. Pertaining to the visual effects, we could talk a little bit about that more. I did all the VFX for Rejected, and that's fun. I did it more so in necessity, because we didn't have a budget to bring somebody else on, so I just had to like roll up my sleeves and, all right, let's do this. Drink a lot of coffee and get it done. But directing is mainly what I have been putting a lot of the eggs in the basket, so to speak.
I mean, I think it shows in the performances. You know, you get a variety of I'd say tones through this, most of which all kind of end in some form of humor. But I'm going to call out in particular the middle segment because you have such great reactions from those people that are going through this completely absurd situation. And the photo or the what is it the pause screen that the thing ends on is just chef's kiss as well. But you tried out your acting hat in this film as well, don't you?
Before we jump into that, to digress a little bit, I kind of half answered your question. I didn't really acknowledge like what was it about indie filmmakers? Like what's some advice that you can give to other indie
Yeah, so
filmmakers?
others that are looking out there, you know, that are kind of looking at others, seeing what they're doing. You know, you've been doing this a long time. You've been self-producing and distributing quite a bit of this. So what advice could you give to those that are either just starting out or those that are still trying to find inspiration?
I mean, at the end of the day, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you're going to commit to something, do it. Put your heart into it, put your passion into it, and just persevere through it, man. Like I've had a lot of people approach me like, how do I write a script? How do I direct? And at the end of the day, I'm just like, I never went to film school. I feel like, you know, on top of being a student of life and a film aficionado and lover my whole life, it's just a matter of just like trying it, failing at it a handful and handful and handful of times, and getting a better grasp of what it is you're doing, and just basically just commit to it. Repetition, you know, practice. Just everybody's a novice at the very beginning, and I still have tons to learn. But that's basically what I would say to any independent filmmakers that are watching this. Just if you want to be a director, get some friends together, write out a quick little half-page scene, and then just set up some cameras and a couple lights, and just try and direct it, and learn from your mistakes. Um, I certainly have learned from a lot of mistakes as an independent filmmaker, and I'm glad that they've been on short productions and not on feature films. Like, granted, the feature that we did in 2016, there's some mistakes in there that there's nothing I could do about. Um, but every production is a learning process, and I would really say to some budding filmmakers, practice your chops on short narrative,
Yeah.
because you don't want to practice your chops on a feature and waste a lot of people's time and create a crummy narrative and a crummy feature that you're not stoked on. Practice your chops on a 2 to 3 minute short film and keep making them. Keep making short films. You know, don't if you have limitations, if you don't have budget, if you don't have a camera, pull out your iPhone. We made a entirely shot on iPhone short film called 103185 that was shot with a budget of like $100. And you know, if you don't have any lights, go get your practical lamp that's sitting in the corner. And there's ways around, and there's creative routes that you can take to make a narrative. And there's tons of resources out there. Um, like I remember, it's been a handful of years since I've really tuned in, but like the likes of like Indie Mogul on YouTube, or what are some other ones? Film Riot, D for Darius. There's a lot of free resources that are essentially free film school, and they teach you everything and anything pertaining to the rudiments of filmmaking and production. So I would recommend hopping on YouTube and just do some diligence and build your knowledge, build your skill set, and just fucking off you go to the races.
Yeah, I mean, I think that almost doubles or it double clicks on your point from before that you have to really put your passion into it. And I think passion means that you're spending a lot of your free time on something that, you know, is something that's only for you. You may not actually get you anything in return, but it is to develop and hone your craft. Um, so, you know, as you're thinking about what you're working on next, Renee, you know, I know it always seems like every time we talk, there's always something new happening. And I know you're consistently writing and creating. So is there anything that you have on the horizon that you're working on that you're able to talk about or that yeah, that you're able to talk about, I guess?
Did you still want to touch on the acting
Oh
portion at
yeah,
all?
let's talk about that acting thing because you have a your Bob Durgan's role is outstanding. But how was that being in front of the camera versus behind?
You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, I want to be a director in feature narrative productions, but I've always had I've always had the itch to do some more acting, and I've done some small supporting stuff, some extra stuff over the years. But I want to get my hands, I want to get my feet wet and my hands dirty in acting a little bit more. And when I wrote the portions, I was just like, I know what I'm looking for in this character. I'm going to do it myself. This is a good little platform for me to try some of my acting chops, and it was a lot of fun. You know, I was acting alongside Sarah Llewellyn, and I think that we had some great chemistry on scene. And you know, what first turned out to be just like, I'm going to write a little connecting tissue short that's going to go around everything. It ended up being a pretty pivotal portion of the short film to give non-viewers additional context of what the hell it is that they're watching. Because there was one point where all three segments were shot, and I took a step back and was like, you know, I know what this is about. It's about three wacky short narratives, and it's, but the audience, they might be a little bit just like, well, that was interesting, but what was the point of it? Now they have the context on what it is, and I took the reins as Bob Durgans, and I had the character envisioned on what I wanted him to look like, with the buck teeth and the braces, and I had to make those braces from scratch. That was a pain in the
Those are
ass.
so gross.
And the wig and the what have you. And Sarah, she had the huge mole on her. But yeah, I just we had a great time and had a good time. One thing I want to really that I forgot to touch on really quick, and then we can
Yeah,
move
yeah,
on
of
to
course.
what's next. Is I really was cognizant on demonstrating different subgenres in Rejected. I wanted it to be a tonal roller coaster. You know, like the first segment. Yeah, this isn't necessarily a spoiler, but the first segment is kind of like our scary short.
Mm.
The second segment is kind of like the tongue-in-cheek slapstick one, and the third story is, I guess, the one that's the most serious in tone. But there's comedy peppered out throughout all three of them, and I really wanted to diversify the short film as much as I could and keep each short into a different horror subgenre that just kind of feels fresh. Um, you know, with lo-fi horror being so prevalent right now,
Mm,
um,
yeah.
and upon seeing the film, which is a terrific film, Late Night with the Devil in theaters, I was like, oh, this is going to help our short film because
Yeah.
it's kind of in the same universe. I mean, granted, that's in the '70s and ours is in the late '90s. It's kind of in that same self-aware meta universe, and I am super excited for people to see it.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's as we get into what you're working on next, I would also love you to talk a little bit more about, how folks will be able to see it, because I know you said that the Indiegogo folks will be able to see it on the 22nd. What about everybody else?
So right now, Rejected is being prepared for its film festival journey, and the strategy that I'm taking with the film festival journey is a little different than our previous efforts. I think the last short film that we submitted to festivals was Judy, which had a terrific run, but I submitted it to everything and anything, like a lot of different film festivals. But with Rejected, I'm aiming high on this one, and I'm submitting it to a lot of pretty prestigious horror, hard to get into festivals that will open up some doors. So I'm kind of concising our plan a little bit. Like my first submission was the Telluride Horror Show, which, God, that would be awesome if we got in a Telluride, and like Scream Fest, and let me really quick, Film Freeway. Let me just name off a couple of ones that we've submitted to so far. Let's see, submissions. Yeah, so at the end of the day, we're aiming pretty high on this one. Let's see, so like Sieges, Screamfest, New York City Horror Festival, Boston Underground, Popcorn Frights, Brooklyn Horror, Los Angeles Horror Film Festival, Beyond Fest, Telluride Horror Show, and that's just to name a few.
Awesome.
So,
Great
so
festivals too. So,
yeah, I really want to get this in front of as many, obviously filmmaking eyes, but as many industry eyes as possible to demonstrate what I'm capable of on a production that's kind of spearheaded from my own budget, essentially, a resource passion project. And that's essentially how people are going to be able to see Rejected over the next 6 months. I think what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do what I've done previously, which is let the film run for a year in film festivals and then release the film. I think I'm going to have like 3 to 4 big premieres and then release it to some kind of platform so people see it earlier. Because by the time we released Judy, a year had gone by and the steam was gone, you know, the hype was
Yeah.
gone. So I really want to get it out to people as soon as I can while retaining the diligence of the festival circuit. But yeah, film festivals, and we have our private cast and crew screening on Monday. That I really can't wait for people to see this thing. I rented out a theater here in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm going to be playing a shorter. So I made a director's cut of Judy. Judy is 24 minutes. I made a 15-minute director's cut that retains the original vision of the first script. That'll be released on October 1st. So that's going to open up the night. And then a reimagining of a music video that we did in 2019, a horror music video, that'll be in the middle. And then we'll close out the night with Rejected, followed by a Q&A with cast and crew.
That's amazing. And, as a reminder for anyone watching this, you can go to Rene Rivas Productions YouTube and watch a lot of his short films. So, you have, it's, again, I think it's important to highlight that a lot of short films, often it's hard to get them out there. And, the fact that we have platforms like YouTube to be able to share them and distribute them a little bit more easily does make access easier. But I do agree with your strategy that we've gotten a lot of short films to review over at Macabre Daily, and I always ask them, how are you going to get this out there? And a lot of them, similar situations, except they don't always think about YouTube as being an avenue. And while it's not, can't really monetize it the same way, it does allow your work to be seen by a lot of eyeballs.
To touch on that really quick, I don't want to take too much more of your time because I know we still have to talk about what's next. I didn't really grasp or so I uploaded all of our films on YouTube probably about a year and a half ago. Even films that were produced like 5, 6, 7 years ago. I kind of was just like, just uploading to YouTube. I don't know how I feel about that. But then like a year and a half ago, I was like, what am I even thinking? Like it has a viewership of millions upon billions of people, and then I can have all of my collective work in one place as a portfolio. So I uploaded everything within the span of like 2 weeks onto YouTube, onto the Rene Rivas Productions page. And I've really just kind of like changed my perspective on YouTube. I mean, granted, it's not necessarily, uh, it's not, my end goal isn't to make money off of the short films. I'm trying to garner awareness, and you're not going to make a lot of money on YouTube with short films, but there's a pretty big audience, and I think our short film, The Tent, is like pushing 600,000 views since releasing it a little over a year ago. But yeah, everything's on YouTube now.
Awesome. So what's next for you, Renee?
What is next? So that is a pretty solid question. And, there was a Facebook post that I wanted to make about a year ago stating that I am super excited for people to see Rejected, but I'm really excited to dive into feature. Because Rejected is like the 7th short film I've done in a row. And we did a little small independent feature horror, not horror, but a drama thriller noir called Northern in 2016. But that was super bare bones. I am ready to dive into feature narrative. And I was working on a screenplay for about a year and a half that's sitting at draft 9.0. And I feel like it's done in my eyes, but obviously if whatever producers come on board, the script can always be dissected, but we've been trimming the fat as much as we can. It's nice and concise. There's barely I went into these revisions with like Rejected in mind, trim as much fat as possible. So just to give you a quick little elevator pitch, the next feature that I'm hoping to move forward on that is currently in development was titled Rock Bottom until about a month ago. I logged on to Amazon Prime and there's a new film called Rock Bottom. that's kind of similar, but not really. It's a comedy, and ours is not a comedy. So I think the new working title is Grunge. I'm not entirely sure, but that's kind of what's percolating at the moment. And the premise of what rock bottom or grunge could possibly turn into, the premise is circa 1992, a rock band is, they have a single on their hands that's rising in the charts, rising in the Billboard charts, and they're approached by Interscope, Outer Scope Records in the script, to be signed as a new band on the platform. And as mentioned, it takes place in 1992 at the height of the grunge era, Stone Temple, Soundgarden, Nirvana, Alice in Chains. And they're on their way to be that next big band with this single on their hands. So Outer Scope Records approaches them. We want to sign you. You guys are great. Terrific act. This song is climbing the charts. The next order of business is we want to produce your first music video. So everything is going great for the band. They're on their way to be the next big thing. And then there's a pivotal point in the story where shit goes wrong. And then the remainder of the story, which is the beginning of, towards the end of the first act, it's a story of Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong with this story. And the way I like to pitch this film, it's an amalgamation of Mandy meets Green Room meets Good Time. And it's a wacky film.
Sounds intense. I'm getting heart palpitations just thinking about that.
It's an intense story. There's a lot of tension in it. It surrounds a rock band that, you know, they have a silver spoon handed to them and they just blow it, and it ends with blood and carnage, and ultimately it's a revenge story. It's a pretty traditional revenge story, but you know, it's going to have the 92 rock aesthetic, the rock soundtrack, and some pretty kick-ass practical effects. It's kind of 75% taking place in one central location. So aside from some lead-up scenes, it all takes place over one night. And yeah, it's a pretty brutal story. All the while, the narrative is got a nice hefty dose of very strong LSD peppered onto it. So it's definitely inspired from my days playing in the rock band and having fun back then. You know, I played in a touring rock band for 5 years as a drummer, and I took that inspiration and actually, can I tell you a little story on how I got the spark to this new feature?
Please.
Yeah, I guess this is a little controversial, but I was doing a photo shoot for a band that I've been working with for many years. I've done 5 or 6 music videos for them, and we were on location at this really quirky house in what's the city? I can't think of the city. It's like 2 hours east of Flagstaff, so it's northern Arizona. And after the shoot, we did the photo shoot for 4 or 5 hours. We were all chilling in the kitchen, and one of the bandmates dropped something. And just, you know, I just went and I grabbed it. Everyone was like, "No, don't grab that." I was like, "Why?" And I looked down, and it's a vial of acid. And I was like, "Oh, shit." He's like, "It could be cracked. And you could have just gotten 30 to 40 hits of acid on your fingers." And it hit me right then and there. Right then and there, I was like, holy shit, I just got the idea for my next feature, or for the feature that I want to do. So I ended up staying the night there because it was a long drive after the shoot. Woke up the next morning at 8 a.m., drank some coffee, busted open the laptop, and started writing the treatment to what would become the screenplay. And yeah, that's
intense. You were this close to having a life-altering experience.
oh man, I got a shiver through my core when they said that. They're like, "It could be cracked. You could have just gotten 30 to 40 hits of acid on your hand." And I was just like, "Oh my God, that would have been." So that's the impetus behind where the screenplay came from, and it's gone through various iterations. At first, it was like 120 pages. More revisions, more rewrites, 110 pages, more revisions, more rewrites. Now it's sitting at a nice, compact 94 pages. It's a suspense thriller with horror tropes, but it's definitely leaning into a bleak ass. It's bleak. It's serious. There's there's no comedy. Essentially, the first two drafts of the film was a comedic horror thriller, but I was like, you know what? That's not what I want to do. I want this to be stern and serious the whole time. So I rewrote it and took all the comedy out. But that's what's hopefully next.
Well, that
So
sounds amazing. I hope whatever needs to happen in order for that to come to fruition happens. Um, And as we round this out, just want to remind everyone that if you're part of the Indiegogo campaign, you can expect to see Rejected tomorrow, or at least, well, we're recording this on the 22nd of July. For everybody else, keep your eyes peeled on various different film festivals. I have good feelings about this one. I'm going to cross my fingers and toes as much as I can. And of course, we'll share through Macabre Daily any sort of ideas or news that come up, if this gets picked up and where you can see it. But Rene, I'm so happy we got a chance to talk about this. I'm so happy you have finished this, and I'm excited for where things are going for you. So thank you for
let,
taking the time.
let me get a quick commemoration.
Yeah, that's perfect.
There it is, our hero
There it is,
prop.
the absolute banger of a camera.
But we had to digitally, painstakingly take out all the logos, and that was not fun at all. But yeah, man,
But your dedication to the craft is present in every aspect of that movie.
but yeah, Matt, it's always been a pleasure. You know, you and I go back decades. We've known each other since we were 10 years or 12 years old, and it's always a blast talking with you about what we're doing here in Arizona. And I'm glad that you get to see the progression, because I really feel like each production that we take on, we're stepping it up. And I really hope that Rejected demonstrates where we're at pertaining to our chops in 2024. And I can't wait for people to see it. It's a fun little 15-minute parody, and um, there's a couple investors coming to the screening on the 22nd, and I invited them specifically to show them what I'm capable of on my own dime, with the hopes that maybe they come on board and believe in this feature film about a rock band in the early 90s. We'll see.
Well, everyone watching this, please send Renee your good juju and your good lucks, because it would be amazing to see that happen. But I have confidence. And again, Renee, thank you for sharing your work with me, and also sharing your time. So everyone, keep an eye out for Rejected out there.
Right on,
Adios.
guys. Thank you.